Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of The Fishing Teacher, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to spend some time with me on today's episode. And guys, today we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to give you guys some tips and advice and a demonstration on how to cast farther, how to make a longer cast, because depending upon the lure situation and the lure category that you're using and the conditions, sometimes the length of your cast makes all the difference in the world about catching bass or not. So I'm going to talk today about those situations where you need to make the maximum distance cast and how to generate that cast through a lot of different variables. So we're going to get into that in today's episode here. Also, guys, a couple quick daily housekeeping tips before we get started. Just want to remind everybody of Tackle Warehouse has still got a bunch of their good Black Friday sales going on left over from Thanksgiving. If you guys are interested in purchasing some tackle or rod and reels or raincoats or anything like that, if you go into the description of my video and use and bookmark that Tackle Warehouse link, it's a good way to help the channel out. And also, guys, I'd like to invite everybody to please consider hitting the subscribe button here to The Fishing Teacher. Free and easy to do so, man. If you want to do something, if you like the content and you want to help the channel out, if you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share the videos, comment on the videos, that really helps out. And we also do have channel memberships here on The Fishing Teacher that you can also support the channel with. So thank you very much for everybody that's taking time to do that. Really appreciate that. Okay, now guys, sometimes depending upon what you're doing, you have got to make a long cast. Now there's a couple different advantages to making a long cast. It's not necessary all the time because sometimes you don't want to make a long cast, and we'll get into that a little bit. But the main advantages and the reason why occasionally you do have to make your longest cast possible is making a longer cast is the way that you get a bait deeper if it has a lip on it. So if you're using like a jerk bait or a crankbait or something like that, the length of your cast determines largely how deep that bait goes. So if you're wanting to maximize the depth of a jerk bait or crankbait, it's to your benefit to make the longest cast possible. And then a couple other factors. Sometimes the fish are really spooky, and the further that you can cast to get away from your boat or yourself, you're going to get a lot more strikes. All the big fish that I have ever caught have come on a fairly long cast. Bass get spooked if you're close to them, especially in clear water. So the aspect of sneaking up on the fish will help you out with a long cast. And then sometimes your target is simply out there. I mean, your target is farther away and you have to generate more of a distance on that. Okay, before I actually get into a demonstration here, the equipment that you're using has a lot to do with your ability to make a long cast. You're going to be able to make a longer cast with a longer rod. So the longer the rod, the easier it is to make a longer cast with it. If you're using a 6 foot or 6.5 foot, spinning rod or baitcaster, you simply cannot cast as far as if you're using like a 7.5 or even 8 foot rod. The generation of the power of that longer rod is going to get that bait further out there. So that's a big factor with it. Another thing is the rod tip. You need some type of a bend in the rod tip here. You guys, the stiffer rods are going to be harder to cast a little bit longer. So you want some type of rod tip that has a fairly, not really a soft, but you need some type of medium to medium heavy action bend in there, or medium action that sort of acts like a catapult a little bit. So a longer rod with some type of a medium action tip is going to be the maximum, or it's going to be the best setup for rod to cast out there. And then obviously, guys, you need to have some type of a reel that doesn't backlash, and also a reel that has a larger diameter spool in it, because larger diameter spool like a 3000 series spinning reel here, or a deeper spool baitcaster, it's going to allow you to have more line on there. And the shallower spools, a lot of times you can cast all that line off them, especially if you're using heavier line. And then finally, on your equipment setup, the lighter the line that you're using, a lot of times will dictate the distance of a cast. If you're throwing, say, a swim bait on 8-pound test line, you're going to be able to cast it a lot farther than if you're throwing a swim bait on 20. So your rod length, your action, your reels, and your line size is going to dictate the distance of your cast. Okay, now once you get that all in line, let's talk a little bit about the actual technique. Let me give you guys sort of a demonstration here, what we're talking about. The longest cast that you're going to have is going to come with a two-handed cast, simply because you have more power behind it. if you're trying to cast one-handed like that, you're not going to be able to get the distance. So if you want to maximize your cast, you have got to learn to cast with two hands. The furthest cast that you can make, as far as in my opinion, is to take a two-handed cast, grip your Baitcaster, just like that with your, two fingers between the trigger there. Grab a hold of the lower part of the handle on your rod there and cast it with two hands at about a 2 o'clock position. So in other words, it's about this position right here. About that 2 o'clock position is the perfect position to really launch that bait out there a long way. And then also another thing with it, it's sort of like golf or bowling. You can get more distance if you use your body along with it, like you use your hips and your momentum. So what I like to do, say I'm ready to make a long cast, I'll actually take one step forward and cast like that. So it's just, my feet are stationary. I take one step forward, cast like that. Now, that is the longest maximum cast. Other ways you can cast a long way is sidearm two-handed like that. You can get a long cast there, or coming from the left side like that. But if I really want to maximize that cast, I've got two hands just like that. Now, let me give you another piece of advice. You can, it doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed. A lot of people cast with their right hand on the Baitcaster and put their left hand like that. You can actually cast farther if you use your left hand. There's something about the momentum of the power that you have with your right hand if you're right-handed, because if you're right-handed, you got more power to push down on the bottom of that rod rather than your left hand like that. So I always go with my left hand, 2 o'clock position like that. Now that's with the Baitcaster. Now let's talk about a spinning rod. Spinning rod's a little bit different here. Spinning rod, what you're gonna have on there is you gotta have a little bit more of a whip on the tip here, because since the spinning rod most of the time is a little bit lighter action, I really want a soft tip on a spinning rod. That soft tip, again, it acts sort of like a slingshot out there. And in order to make a long cast with the spinning rod here, you also have to have the proper distance between the rod tip and your bait. So you want to have probably about 3.5 feet. It's like if you have a little bit shorter, you can't make quite as long as a cast, but I want some type of about a 3.5 foot distance. And that acts even more like the catapult, and it's sort of the same cast, guys, with it, except instead of using my body, I'm using my wrist more. I'm still holding it with two hands. I got my left hand above it. I've got my right hand above my reel here. I've got my left hand on the handle, and I'm using a lot more of a wrist action. I'm not throwing it out there with my arm like I do with the Baitcaster. It's more of a chew, just like that. Same deal with the sidearm cast like that, but you're gonna reduce your distance about 20 foot. So 2 o'clock position, snap that wrist like that. That wrist action is really, really critical on a spinning outfit versus a Baitcaster. The Baitcaster is more about just the overall, use of your arm and your whole body with it. It has to do with the way that the line comes off the spool. Inherently, there's just two different pieces of equipment, a spinning and a Baitcaster. Other factors that determine that is wind. Wind is a huge factor as far as maximizing your distance. So you always want to try to cast with the wind if possible. I mean, you can't, I don't care what lure you're throwing, if you're trying to throw into the wind or sideways into the wind, you can't get the distance. So always try to position your boat where you're casting with the wind. Another thing about that, guys, I see a lot of people out there that are they fight the wind. They put that nose of the boat into the wind. I don't ever want to do that. I find that I catch more bass if I cast with the wind anytime that I'm fishing. It's like you can cast further, your bait lands more natural in the water, it falls more natural. You can be more quiet because you can actually, let the boat drift without having to be on the trolling motor into the wind. So another piece of advice I'll give you is always try to work with the wind and cast with the wind. It's going to help out. And that's just one thing, guys. Those are situations where you need to make a long cast. And normally the long cast is going to be needed in clear water situations, or if you're trying to get that bait deep, like deep cranking a big deep diving crankbait or something like that. A lot of times you don't want that. A lot of times, it's more of a shorter medium distance cast. Like if you're pitching and flipping, or you're throwing to lay down trees with a spinner bait. But there are some situations where you really have to launch it out there, and that's how you do it. So Anyway, I hope it helps out, guys. We'll talk later.